The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of the Crimes of Grindelwald. I see with that German V.
Oh, nice.
Where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this brand new Harry Potter movie. Joining me today on the panel are Lynn Francisco. Hi, Lynn.
Hello, Dom.
And Thomas Sanherho. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Dom. How's it going?
Very well, and I'm glad to have you both back, because last November, as we record this, recording this in April of 2019, in November of, or was it October of 2018? Well, last fall, we discussed the first Fantastic Beasts movie, and we're back together again to talk about this second of the Fantastic Beasts movies in the Harry Potter universe. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind folks to remember to like The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on Facebook at our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, and to retweet this episode if you can on Twitter as well. We're at SQPN. Leave comments, subscribe to the podcast if you have not yet subscribed on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on YouTube, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. And above all, share the podcast with your friends to help us grow this community and reach more listeners. So this movie is a sequel to the Fantastic Beasts movie, as we mentioned, and it pretty much picks up a little bit after, a few months after. Well, it doesn't exactly pick up right after. We have a sort of prequel scene, and then we jump by 6 months. So let me just start where it starts. It starts with New York, 1927, and Grindelwald is in jail, and this is where we ended with the previous movie, where this evil wizard, is it okay we call him evil? Because from his point of view, he's not evil. He's trying to do something good. Is it okay we call him evil?
Yeah, sure. I know evil is in the eye of the beholder.
We're going to have a conveation about that.
Yeah.
Right.
So stay tuned.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. He sees himself as the hero of this story, as all evil villains do. But so he had been captured by the American Makusa Magical Association Congress of the United States of America. I think that's what they call themselves, the equivalent of the Ministry of Magic, because he was in the form of Colin Farrell before and ruined it, and now he's in the form of an albino Johnny Depp or something along those lines, and had been imprisoned as this very dangerous villain. He's sort of almost more. Is he? Let's talk about this for a second. Who do you think is the bigger evil villain wizard? Is it Voldemort or Grindelwald? Who's more dangerous?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I think in sheer power, Grindelwald just blows everybody out of the water. Like even Dumbledore is really questionably a match for Grindelwald. And just use the final scene of this movie where he's taking on an entire group of highly trained aurors, and it's a joke to him. It's not even
close.
It's all part of his spiel,
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Lynn? What do you think?
That's kind of a hard one. But yeah, I would probably agree that Grindelwald's probably the more powerful wizard, because Riddle, although his environment made him who he was, he also relied on other external things for his power. Whereas with Grindelwald, I don't know. It from what I saw, it seems a little bit more internal to himself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
It puts me in mind of, as most things do, of Star Wars, which is, in Star Wars, like Palpatine was the big bad evil dude, and Darth Vader was his servant. But had Anakin Skywalker not been maimed in that battle on Mustafar, he probably would have surpassed Palpatine in Force power and in strength in the Force, and would have been the more powerful Sith, in my opinion. And I think that's the case here, because Voldemort had his power stunted by being split into the Horcruxes and that whole thing.
Right.
Sort of like, or in the Lord of the Rings, Sauron in imbuing his power into the ring, which divided his power, which made him less powerful than he otherwise would have been. So it's an interesting trope. Trope has a negative connotation. I don't mean that, but it's an interesting fixture in lots of different kinds of literature. And I think
it's a device. The good term is device.
Device, exactly. Thank you. In lots of literature, and I include films in literature in this case, to use for the villain who has limited himself through some external factor, and usually as a mistake. And it's his fatal flaw. I wonder what Grindelwald's is.
You see it. You see it in this movie. The bond, the blood bond is that's his big. Like, he can't. Dumbledore's always going to be a factor there unless he can somehow get rid of it.
Oh, that's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, that is right. That the blood pact, which we can come back to, it seems to be a key, but they didn't reveal exactly how that's a weakness yet, but they've got something like 3 more movies.
I think 5 more. I think they're going to go for the full seven movie gamut. So
wow.
Wow! I had heard 5, so yeah, so 7, huh?
Yeah, there's lots of different numbers that are being thrown around right now for it, so we'll see how it goes. To use another Tolkien reference, I hope it's not too much butter over too little bread. As far as story.
Agreed.
Well, I'm actually worried the opposite direction almost, because there was a little bit too much butter in this movie and not enough of the bread to really carry it through.
Well, yeah, that's kind of true, actually. This film, it just, without going into spoilers quite yet, there's just so much that was packed into that 134 minutes that, it's a little bit overwhelming to take in on first viewing, so you kind of have to see it a few more times to appreciate it more, I think.
Well, in the middle of the movie, I was making comments, and I'm glad that my wife and daughter had seen it, because they were like, no, that's not who that was. No, that was the other guy. And so we had to pause the movie several times for them to go, no. And I'm normally pretty good at keeping up with this stuff, but there were a lot of characters that appeared very briefly and were really important to moving the plot forward. And then they would reappear again later in the movie, and you're like, wait a minute. I know this guy's important, but I've totally forgotten him.
There was a large cast of characters, and that's actually something I want to bring up too.Maybe we could talk about that now, and then because there's also another point I want to make too. But I felt at times like you needed to really get this movie, you had to be a Potterhead. You had to be a big fan who knew a lot of the people. You had to know the stuff. You had to know it. If you're just a casual viewer, and I think I'm more than just a casual viewer, but even I felt at times a little lost with all the different moving parts, all the different people, and all the different stuff. But what do you think? Was it overloaded with that sort of thing?
I was disappointed that it moved so far away from focusing on Newt. And I saw so many really, really amazing things that they were doing in a directorial way to make Newt such even more interesting character than he was. But there was so much politics, and there was so much of the world stage being kind of crammed into this movie that you would get that, and you'd be like feeling really comfortable, like, oh yeah, we're learning more about Newt, we're really feeling Newt out, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I gotta go take notes on all of this other stuff that's going on now.
Yeah, to me it seemed like you have this little piece, and then you have this little piece, and then you have this little piece, and that somehow it's going to be woven all together. And then it makes me wonder, well, where's the focus on this? And if things, as you mentioned, you have a lot of butter but not an awful lot of bread in this situation, because it's just so tightly packed.
Well, you got the focus on Credence and Nagini. Then you've got Grindelwald and his gang. Then you got Newt and Tina. You got Jacob and Queenie. You've got Theseus and Lita and Newt and Yusuf over here. And then you got Dumbledore versus the Ministry of Magic guy. And yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on. And it was a little bit like you getting dizzy from the focus shifting so quickly, which. I don't want it to sound like I didn't like this movie. I did like it, but the times it felt like I I just wish it would settle down at some point.
Yeah.
That it felt like they were building up to it's classic middle movie problem, middle movie of a series, where it's not the beginning of the story and it's not the end of the story. They're carrying the story and building the story to get to the resolution. And you're not going to see that in this movie.
It felt that way too. It felt very much like this is and I can excuse a little bit of it because it felt kind of like you're bringing Newt in to the bigger picture, which the first movie was all about him and the magical creatures. And then there were these hints of other things. And then right at the end, it kind of surprised us with this, oh, wait, there's this other thing going on that you need to be paying attention to. And then this movie was kind of like, okay, now let's bring Newt all the way into it. Let's like kind of shove him in the middle of everything that's going on. And I don't mind it for that reason because I see what they're doing with it. But there was so much tenderness on some of the story fronts that had to be lost just for time. And they were good. They were good interpersonal stories that were woven very well and just needed a little bit more time spent on them to really flesh them out all the way.
The other thing that really kind of struck me with this movie was there were a lot of scenes of a lot of talking where people standing in a space and talking to one another for long stretches. Lots of exposition of the bigger world, like you mentioned. And while we got some of the Fantastic Beasts, we got much less of it than we did. Like again, if we're comparing to the first movie, obviously, we got much less of that. I mean, that first part where we were in Newt's basement, I mean, how could Newt's basement not be amazing with these amazing creatures? But even then, we kind of saw hints of these creatures, but not a lot. We had that one, the kelp dragon or whatever they called it, the kelp creature, and then we had a few other creatures. We had the Chinese lion, right? Wasn't it?
Well, it kind of reminded me of I don't know, a mix between a dragon and a cat.
Yeah.
Is that the one you were talking about? I forgot what it was called.
It's the one that they use it at Chinese New Year where they have all the guys inside the dancing. Exactly. I thought it was like a lion or a dragon.
Is what they called it.
Yeah, so it's the real version of that.
I'm probably murdering its pronunciation. Zou. Maybe.
Yes.
The Chinese creature?
Yes, exactly, that one. I mean, that was cool, and we had a couple of that, but it felt like it was a lot more people standing around talking than there was fun with creatures, which is what what I really enjoyed about Fantastic Beasts was the amazing imagination and there was still a lot of creativity in this, and that's if there's one thing that really strikes me about the Potter world, it's the amazing creativity that's involved in this story.
Right. And I think the reason this movie feels the way it does is because they made some mistakes in the way that they were thinking about it. They were thinking about this as if it were Harry Potter the Phenomena already. And that was one of the great things about the original series of movies is that it was told from a kid's perspective who didn't know anything about the magical world, and he had to be introduced to it. And so just like that, we had to be introduced to it. And then what ended up happening with this movie is we kind of got dumped into it, and we're not ready for it yet,
The two things I really like about Newt is that every creature is important to him. There are no unimportant creatures. There are no monsters. That's one of the famous lines from the first movie and this movie is for Newt. There are no monsters, and he in many ways he's like that with people too. He always sees the good, even when they through their own nature, at least the creatures, their nature causes them to harm others. But he knows that it's just their nature. That's what they do. They're animals or beasts,
right? Well, and even with people, even when they see themselves as bad, he sees the good in them, and you see that with the relationship between him and Lita.
Yes,
and how that develops.
Right. That's what, and the second thing I love about Newt is that he struggles with the social connections. These classic. A lot of people point out would classically be autistic or on the spectrum, as we say nowadays. But he exhibits those attributes, and yet that's a strength for him in many ways, and not a weakness. And that I love seeing this. I love seeing these characters in a lot of these shows now, where they exhibit these what would have been weaknesses in the past, but they're that a lot of young people seeing these movies will see, and they'll see themselves in this, and they'll see a role model in this. And I really like that about Newt. I think Eddie Redmayne does a great job with this.
Oh, and the whole crew did such a great job with it this time. There were some fantastic scenes where he's talking with someone and they're uncomfortably close to the edge of the screen in the camera shot, and you don't notice that that's something that they avoid doing until they don't do it very specifically to show you that this character's not looking at the person he's talking to. And so he was early on in the movie, he was having a conversation with Lita, and he was looking down the hallway at his brother, and she was off to the side of the screen, but she was actually still talking, and we were getting good information from her. And it's like, pay attention to her. What's going on here?
Right, exactly.
It's almost as if they were kind of filming from Newt's point of view in that situation, I'd say.
Yes. There was that reminds me of another one of those characters that kind of got shoved off to the side a little bit, didn't get enough treatment, was his assistant at his home who helps him, who obviously is sort of sweet on Newt of some sort, but he doesn't notice. What was Bunting? Miss Bunting, I think it was. But did not get enough screen time. Did not get, almost a waste of a character. Like, well, they probably shouldn't have included her at all, only because she didn't have enough time to be anything in the story, really. That was unfortunate, and that happened a few times with some of these characters, like Nagini, who we should talk about that. But I want to talk about some of the story as we go in the early part. We have this jailbreak. Grindelwald breaks out of jail. That was an amazing scene. That whole thing.
Pretty clever.
Yes,
but again, it suffered from this like, wait, who's where and what, with all the polymorphing, and you're just like, okay, he's not okay. So he switched places with this guy, but it was hard to keep track. And
was this guy a dupe, or was he in on it? That was
exactly
confusing.
Mm-hmm. It was hard. It was hard to keep. And then I loved it because it was really exciting, and it had that kind of caper feel to it. Where they've got all this stuff planned out ahead of time, and they've really pulled one over on these R's and the way that they were ready to handle anything. But yeah, it was exciting. It was high energy too.
Why did Grindelwald let the Auror that he kicked out of the carriage survive? He basically gave him his wand so he could save himself. I didn't understand that.
Was that the American equivalent of the Minister for Magic?
No, the
he was a European official.
Oh, yeah. The European official.
Spielman, I think he was. Yeah.
All right, so I'm also getting my characters confused.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Now I remember. So
I think there is there's something to Grindelwald that he cares for people who can use magic,
especially if they're blue, especially if they're pure blood. And I wonder if maybe that particular wizard was a pure blood.
And I think that really is what it comes down to. It's that his care is for keeping people who are magic users, pure-blooded magic users especially, safe.
Okay.
And I think that was the first indication you get of it. And then later the grandstanding that he does is that it kind of ties all that back together again.
Right, at the rally. Yeah. Okay. One of the other things that this scene brought back to me was just a reminder of how the prison and justice system of the wizarding world is not at all humane. Does not. I mean, it is bad. I have to say. Yeah.
Well, I thought about that though. It doesn't matter. You can cut off somebody's tongue and regrow it.
Yeah, but
it's like, I mean, like, would if somebody is using their nails to scratch someone in our prison system, you would take them to the hospital and clip their nails, right? And that would be considered humane because they're going to grow back. There's not really a big issue there. And I just to frame this, so if anybody's worried about this and thinking about this way, Quidditch right now in our world, in the United States, is suffering a problem where there are a lot of concussions happening because large aggressive players who are playing the role of beaters are actually aggressively ramming into much smaller players who are playing the role of Seeker. And their excuse for it is, well, that's how the game is played. And because there are no rules and because Skelegro is not a thing, it's an issue, you know?
Right.
And it's a limitation that we have that I really think, you know, it bothered me at first, that comment, but then I thought about it too. I was like, you cut out his tongue for right now, and then when he needs it back, just grow it back. If
it's painless, I suppose. Although the Dementors always bothered me, that you would have these demonic creatures of, you know, or ghoulish creatures. I don't say demonic carries a whole load of baggage, that word, but these ghoulish creatures who, you know, if you end up in Azkaban, that's like hell. I don't know. It just,
no hope.
I have my reservations with it. So, but I get your point. In the Wizarding World, things would, because they can recover from things much differently than we can. Maybe it's different for them. That's a fair point. So we then pick up months later at the Ministry of Magic with Newt and his brother Theseus, who was mentioned in the previous movie, as well as Lita Lestrange. How do we know the name Lestrange from the original Harry Potter movies?
It was one of the big pureblood families, and one of the longtime Slytherin placements. So, and so they had some of the students were, the younger Lestranges, I think, were students at Hogwarts during Harry's time. And then, of course, the adult Lestrange were also part of Voldemort's inner circle as well.
Bellatrix was a Lestrange.
Of course, yeah.
Sister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's that right. Too. I knew that from. And so in this case, she is, there's a sort of affection between Lita and Newt. And we're supposed to understand that because of Newt's social reservation, his, perhaps we could say autism, that relationship never went anywhere, and she ended up with his brother, who is much more conventional sort of person, normative, sort of social personality, and so she ended up with him instead. And so there's this awkward romantic triangle that we have here. And so his brother
gets played up a lot in the movie because of a simple mistake in the newspaper too.
Yeah.
So,
right. That caused the problem with Tina. Yeah.
I think it's a good. I don't know, and that's one of the ones that I wish they would have treated it more, because I don't feel like it was just his social awkwardness or anything with Newt particularly, or on Newt's end, that prevented him from ending up with Lita. It seems like there was something else going on there, and it's part of her story that I think really needed to be brought out a lot more.
Yeah, that she maybe felt like she didn't deserve Newt, or
exactly
that he's too
pure. You get hints of that, but it's really it's just kind of glazed. It's like almost there. It's almost there, and we can imagine it, and you can definitely, from everything that's set up, you can imagine that story playing out. But it really doesn't seem like it's Newt's fault that the thing didn't work.
Right. That's a good point. And so the Ministry is trying to get Newt to join as an Auror, and Newt is against this. He's you essentially wizarding equivalent of a pacifist, not exactly, but in the sense of he feels like Aurors misuse their power, and especially against the beasts. They treat them as something to be killed or captured and imprisoned, as opposed to just creatures that need to be better understood. And we find out that Grindelwald wants to start a war with the Muggles and wants to use Credence to do it. And we find out that Credence has survived. Now, did we know this at the end of Fantastic Beasts, that Credence survived?
No, in fact, even you see that some of the other characters in the film assume that Credence did not survive. So it comes as a surprise that, oh, he did. He's someplace else. He's trying to find who his birth mother is.
I heard some references to what sounded like scenes, but I didn't remember them. So there must be something else where, and maybe Rowling wrote these up and put them on Pottermere, her website or something, of his survival of that confrontation in the subway in New York, where Grindelwald was captured, and it looked like he was blasted into those black flaky bits that rained down on everyone, but that he survived that. So I was that confused me a little bit right there. And his brother Theseus tells Newt, the time is coming when everyone is going to have to pick a side, and Newt says, I don't do sides. And he's wrong. He ends up learning how wrong he is about that, because his brother is right. You can't stay neutral in the battle between good and evil. There is no Switzerland. You can't stay neutral. And I think that speaks to a larger truth that we're seeing here is when we're confronted by evil, we have to stand against it. We can't stand on the sidelines and watch evil harm the innocent and harm others. And Newt gets a real education in that in this movie, I think.
He is the American moviegoer lately, because
right.
I think that's one of the things I love about this film, and I love about Rowling's series overall, is that it's archetypal. There is a good, there is an evil. The lines are clear. You can even sympathize with some of the things that the evil people are saying, like, oh, well, I mean, from their perspective, I can see how that makes sense, but they are very clearly evil. And I like that. I like the clarity of being able to say the ends do not justify the means. There are times where we do have to take a stand, but that still doesn't change the fact that we have to treat everything with respect and everyone with respect as well.
Right.
Yeah, well, it almost seems to me like it's kind of Rowling's view on what may have been world events back in the time when it was set. So this was set in 1927, late 20s, or thereabouts.
Yep.
And so, of course, you also had a lot of the turmoil that was going on in Europe at the time, what with the rise of Nazism and the like. And so I saw a lot of kind of not really references, but it's more like maybe relations to what she created in her world and what happened in the world, particularly the Europe of the late 1920s and early 1930s.
Yeah, Grindelwald's purebloods recalls Hitler's Aryans, and the Muggles would be, the Jewish people per se, from his point of view, and we see him twist that in that final speech of the rally. I'm just going to jump to that part, right, because it's relevant to what we're saying. Is in that he's, in order to convince people of his rightness in this rally, which doesn't that evoke the Nazi rallies of this era? He says, look at what these Muggles are going to do. They're going to start this. He shows them a vision of World War II, which apparently he has the ability to show the future, where even nuclear, atomic bombs, the Muggles are going to, we have to stop them. Look what they'll do if we don't stop them and control them. And even the good wizards are shocked by what they see.
Right.
And you hear Jacob's like, another war, because Jacob is a veteran of the First World War, and we remember. And so he, even though he's like the Nazis, he uses the existence of the Nazis and what they're going to do as a way to convince others to support his war on the Muggles, which is, I have to say, that is a very clever writing gimmick, not gimmick, writing device that they've implemented there to really to make Grindelwald even more devious. I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and he's also a very charismatic character as well. I mean, just look at the way he was very convincing in the way that he's speaking. And even the way that, okay, spoiler alert here, even the way that he seemed to have converted Queenie to his cause.
Yes.
Right.
Very charismatic character.
Well, and I think a lot of what he says is it's one of those things where he's speaking in generic enough terms that he could say, I'm just against what they're for. And that's, they're for the control of these kinds. Because there's nothing about what he is saying that should be attractive to Queenie, because Queenie's whole shtick is that she wants to be with Jacob. She doesn't want to, she doesn't want to kill him. She doesn't want to, besides the slight flub at the beginning where she's enchanted him, she doesn't want to subjugate him. to her will.
Well, yeah, I was going to point out that actually I think was a very intentional inclusion in Queenie's character.
Mm-hmm.
That use of the enchantment.
Yeah, but you notice that she hates it. I think that's the thing that redeems her away from that. Like, she doesn't see him as just a character just a toy. She doesn't see him as a toy or a pet. Which I think is kind of the point you're getting with from Newt's character's perspective. But she sees him as someone to value and to love, and she's struggling with the potential that she has versus the reality that she's dealing with.
And her own insecurity, she's not secure enough in her own ability to be a mate for Jacob, and so she uses her magic. Sort of, just for her and for the wizarding world, magic is just part of who you are. So I use my magic on things, which reminds me a lot of. Have you seen Umbrella Academy on Netflix?
Yes, yeah.
I haven't.
There's
one character who has the ability to make people bend people to her will by saying, "I heard a rumor," and then saying something that she wants them to believe or do or think. And she becomes a mother. And boy, as a parent, this one struck me. She starts to do that to her child, like when the child won't go to bed and when the child is fussing. I heard a rumor that a little girl is sleepy. I heard a rumor that a little girl needs to clean her room. And she uses this to get her to do good things. And she's using something that's essential to her to who she is. But her husband finds out and he leaves her, takes the child. Like, you're mentally abusing our child. This is an abuse. And she realizes how wrong she was. And I see a little of that in Queenie, who is using this power because she's insecure, but also because it's easy. And face it, if you had the ability to read the minds of people around you, I think things that I don't believe all the time. I mean, Jacob does that. Like, he thinks you're crazy. He doesn't say it out loud. It's a fleeting thought. Like, oh man, you must be crazy to believe that. And he would never say that out loud to his wife. And yet she hears all of these thoughts, and it makes her insecure. And Grindelwald takes that insecurity and turns her. Talks to her about freedom to do things, and the freedom he offers is enslavement. And that's the everything evil offers. The flip side, it looks like the good thing, but is always the bad thing. It's the flip side. It's always twisted. Whatever evil promises. So, but I did not like, though, that they did turn Queenie to the bad side. that did bother me, because she was one of my favorite characters from the first movie.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, though, if there was a purpose to that.
Oh, undoubtedly.
But I'm sure we'll find out, because you notice, okay, spoiler alert again. So towards the end of the film, where she's using her, I guess, her empathetic qualities to warn Grindelwald about Credence being somewhat sensitive. So, there might be that kind of connection there, right? Queenie and Credence, that they're probably going to try to develop in another film. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that, I don't know. I really, there was not enough time to develop all the characters that were surrounding Grindelwald. And it was a hard look into his people, because you saw that, you saw some basic setup, that there were a bunch of 2D characters that were standing around him that were there just to show, oh, these guys are evil. They're willing to kill children. Oh, these guys are evil. They're willing to just steal property. They're willing to do all these things. And, I like the complexity that you have, even with Grindelwald, where he's made a connection with another person, and with a person like Dumbledore. And then to look at that and see that there are so many characters that are broken in this series, and what they do with that brokenness is it's what defines the character. And that's you see it with Lita, you see it with Dumbledore here, you see it even with Grindelwald, when we're starting to learn a little bit more about him. And I really hope that they push that boundary all the way back so that we can see what it was that made him, who was a friend with Albus Dumbledore, become so dark and so far gone.
You know, you mentioned how they kill the child. That's another thing that kind of bothered me in this movie is how twice they showed the death of a child as an emotional hit, and I don't like when movies use that. I just like that moment when they kill the random couple to take over their home, and then they walk into the bedroom where the little child is looking. That was hard for me to watch. I have to admit that was. And in a movie that's probably aimed at a young audience in general, that's hard to. I had a hard time with that.
But is it really aimed at a young audience? Because I mean, with it being a little bit more on the darker side, I would think that she moved her aim a little bit higher as far as the age group is concerned.
Well, I would say whether they're aiming it at that age group or not, they're going to see it because Harry Potter. And let's be honest, this is still Harry Potter, is seen as preteen, teen material in general. And so they're seeing that their parents are saying, hey, go watch this Harry Potter movie. You know, this is still, you know, and that was always a trick for me with the original series of books was while the books aged with Harry. And so the first books were much less dark. Kids reading them didn't always age at this, didn't read them at one per year. Right. You know what I mean? So you sometimes had younger kids reading this. By the time the whole set is out, younger kids reading the seventh book.
Right. Or as us, you know, when the books were actually coming out, they aged with us. And I think that's part of what's been trying to happen here with this series where, you know, Fantastic Beasts it's aimed at our generation, at our age group, the people who were there at midnight for the signing or for the sale of the last Harry Potter book,
right? With
our kids in tow, you know, with our infants in tow. That's that group that carried through.
That's true. I guess that's what they're aiming the movie at that age group. Along with the stage play, I forget what it's called, but
Cursed Child.
Cursed Child. That's right. Where it's aimed at, this is Harry now as our age or your age anyway.
30s, I think.
Yeah, with kids and who are now at Hogwarts, that sort of thing. Interesting. So Newt and Dumbledore have this connection, which is different. I don't want to get into the whole rumors thing, but there was all this rumor that there would be a different kind of relationship between them. But obviously that's not true here, that they don't have the rumored kind. I don't want to get into that, but they have this connection, this relationship, and Dumbledore recruits him. And he has recruited him in the past. Recruits him for this mission to go save Credence in Paris, and he says something to Newt. He says, "I admire you because you don't seek power or popularity. You just ask if a thing is right," and that's what makes Newt the hero. Is right. It's what he's doing. Whatever he's doing because it's right, not because it makes him stronger. Makes people like him. It's just, is it right or is it wrong? And I will do the right. And I really liked that about this character and about how Dumbledore treats him.
I like that it's Dumbledore that says it. That's my favorite part of this, because it puts Dumbledore in the spot that he is in, but that we never get to see really in the books, because we're always seeing Dumbledore through Harry's eyes.
Right.
And,
true.
And so we always think of Dumbledore as this guy who's looking at things and asking what's right. But there's very clearly a motivator for Dumbledore all throughout his life. He is very driven by guilt. And while the character from the original books is kind of untarnishable and he is great in what he is, when you really dig into even what was in those books, he was driven by guilt and trying to fix problems that he had created because he saw potential, or because he saw opportunity, or because he wanted to be popular or around people that had power.
Well, you remember too his guilt surrounding his sister Ariana, right? And
Right.
so another key quote that came from the film when he was speaking with Lita Lestrange: "Regret is my constant companion. Do not let it become yours." Right?
Right.
So that that might be another thing that's driving him. And also him saying that he wished that he loved his sister more.
We saw. Did we see a flashback to Dumbledore and his sister in a previous movie? Do we know that story of what happened to his sister, or has it always just been hinted that she died and he feels responsible?
In the books, you get a fuller view of it than in the original movies.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
And yeah, so the original movies hint at it, but really don't dig into it very deep. The books dig into it a little more, where her death is questionable at best, and so you can definitely lay it at his feet if you want to, but the overriding person of Dumbledore is he wouldn't do that, he wouldn't do that, he wouldn't do that, and then clearly you get to the end and you're like, oh well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure how garbed in white this guy really is, and it's a really good treatment of the character, because I think he still retains a lot of that, the admiration, and he deserved it. He definitely deserved to be an admired figure. But you see, especially now, diving into this more of his history, you see that he really did. He wanted to be around people that were powerful, and he wanted to be popular, and he made a lot of bad decisions because of that. And he keeps doing it even throughout his life. It's one of his constant things that, he did it with Grindelwald. He did it with his family because he didn't want to be sequestered away with his sister. And so that there were some things that went on there that we're not really sure about. And then we see now, and then you see in the original series, you see him with Tom
Riddle
and
Tom Riddle,
how and how that came to play and how that came to pass, because he saw potential in this kid and he wanted to be around someone that was powerful and someone that was, he wanted to be the mentor to this person. And you see it with Harry too. It just so happens that Harry is not, Harry doesn't go down the dark path. In Harry's case, Harry takes the better path, at least as far as we see in the story.
Yeah, even in a way with Snape, he's like that with him guiding him. So Tina turns out is in Paris looking for Credence as an Auror, and so Newt. That's what convinces Newt, is that Tina's there. I mean, the other stuff he might have gone because Dumbledore asked, but Tina's there. He's going and he's going to take Jacob because Queenie is on her way there as well. So we have this scene, this really cool scene of Tina going to this circus, the Circus Arcanus in Paris, this wizarding circus, and we meet this tragic figure, Nagini, and I want to be sure I understand who she is. So she's a maledictus, which is someone who's cursed, that every night when they sleep, they turn into this creature, an animal. But eventually they will turn into that animal and never turn back and stay that. And she is cursed to become a snake. And she's the snake that Harry encounters in the Philosopher's Stone, the Sorcerer's Stone. Is that right?
Oh, in the
underneath Hogwarts.
Underneath Hogwarts. Okay, yeah,
yeah.
I'm not sure. I know.
So we're talking about Dumbledore's, or we're talking about Voldemort's pet, right?
Yeah, right. Nagini. She eventually becomes Voldemort's pet snake.
I think we're making an assumption there. I think I am holding out that we're making an assumption.
Okay.
I am still, this is theory, but I'm thinking that somewhere Credence is involved in Tom Riddle's past. Family member, possibly. I'm betting that that's where it is. I don't think that Nagini is actually a snake. And I know ages get played with a lot here, and that's one thing that people complain about with this movie, is that McGonagall shouldn't have been a professor at the school, because that would make her way too old. And
that I found really jarring. I was like, McGonagall, what?
And Dumbledore, frankly, yeah.
So, and I get that wizards are longer lived, but still, there would be a lot of issues there if Nagini was still the snake that is with Voldemort later on. So I think that there's something family-wise going on, and I think that if you look at Tom Riddle's history of doing things, he would have looked into his past and found something that he would have named this snake that is his familiar after someone significant in his past.
Okay.
And that's where I'm placing my money on it. I think that's how this is going to play out. And I don't think this is my big prediction for the movie. So spoiler here for everybody. If you got to the end of the movie, there is a very clear indication that there is a thought that Credence is a sibling of the Dumbledore.
Yeah, no, I don't think
that's right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You think that Grindelwald is lying to him, tricking him into thinking he's Dumbledore?
I think Grindelwald is also tricking him. I highly doubt that Credence is really a Dumbledore.
Interesting. Yeah, and I like that idea. And I want to correct something I said before. The snake underneath Hogwarts that Harry battles in the beginning of Philosopher's Stone is not Nagini. That's a separate snake.
Isn't that a basilisk?
That's a basilisk. That's right. Right. It's been a long time since I've either read or seen that movie. So,
and that's Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah.
That was Chamber of Secrets.
Oh, right. Yeah. Man, it has been a long time. It's time to reread.
There you go.
So, Credence is in love with Nagini and wants to save her, which is an interesting thing. Parallel with Newt, Newt wants to save the creatures, and Nagini is sometimes a creature, and so he wants to save her. She's also a character who does not get enough development. Well, maybe we'll see more of that in future movies. Grindelwald needs Credence to join him of his own free will in order to get him to kill Dumbledore for him. Why does Grindelwald need Credence to kill Dumbledore for him when Dumbledore and Grindelwald have this blood pact where they're going to face each other in battle someday, and only one will emerge? Which I want to find out how this blood pact got formed in the first place. But
yeah, actually, doesn't the blood pact or unbreakable vow or whatever it is, didn't it dictate that the two would never fight against each other? And so
yeah.
And so
that was confusing though, because they mentioned that very briefly, very quietly, very quickly, right in the middle of a whole bunch of other stuff happening. And you're like, wait, what did he say? So if you saw this in the theaters, you could have walked away with a very different perspective than being able to pause and rewind.
As I did.
Yeah. Because I remember I kept on wondering, okay, that necklace has something to do with the plot for later on. And of course, if you have the chance to see this outside of the theaters, as Thomas said, you could rewind. And I'm like, oh, okay, that probably looks like, that necklace has a pendant, and that pendant has something in the middle of it, which appeared to be holding blood, which made me immediately think Unbreakable Vow. And we did see this as a plot device in, I want to say, the Half-Blood Prince, when Narcissa Malfoy and Severus Snape made an unbreakable vow that Snape would protect Draco.
Right.
Ah.
And so I saw something similar here, where Dumbledore and Grindelwald made some sort of an unbreakable vow that they would never fight each other. And that's the reason why Dumbledore told the Minister for Magic, I'm sorry, I cannot fight against Grindelwald. And of course, they interpret that as, well, then you're on his side, which is very far from the truth.
Right.
Interesting. And of course, since Grindelwald is also bound by this unbreakable vow, he also cannot fight Dumbledore. But if he wants to kill Dumbledore, he'd have to find somebody else to do it for him.
They have to fight through proxies. Interesting.
Yeah.
The idea of the vial of blood. I mean, that's from a Catholic perspective. That the idea of a relic. There are Eucharistic miracles of where the blood of Christ in the chalice under the form of in appearances of wine. Throughout history, there have been a few times where it's turned to actual blood, and in some cases remains that way to this day, hundreds of years later, and is kept in what we call reliquaries, which are very similar, usually bigger, but very similar in shape. Interesting parallel there. I'm not sure you could take it too far, but it brings it to mind anyway. And I wonder if there's something, a thought to tease out of that not right now, but maybe at a later point I could tease that out of there. So that would be interesting. So Credence and Nagini find his mother's servant, who brought him to the lady Barebones, who was his foster mother or adopted mother in New York, They find the servant who gave him up for adoption, and just as he's about to get the the necessary information from her, Grimson attacks. Now, Grimson is another one of these characters. I'm like, who's this guy?
Right.
That was my reaction when I saw him. I was like, who is this guy? Why did he kill her?
And it's so confusing because, and the confusing part is that you see him at the first time in that meeting with Newt at the Ministry of Magic.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's meeting with Grindelwald and you're like, oh, okay. But if you didn't catch that very brief introduction of him the first time and think, oh, this guy's going to be important, I need to pay attention to him.
Right.
Then, seeing him later meeting with Grindelwald, you're like, wait, why are we introducing this new character all of a sudden? Well,
especially, we know that Newt doesn't like him for some reason, because when Newt saw him, it's like, oh, you bad guy, you. But we don't know why he dislikes him. And so we have no backstory. And then, but we have, we didn't, I don't know if we even got a name from that first meeting. I had to go, I'm on IMDb looking this stuff up as the movie's going along so I can figure out who's who. But then, then we have this, where he attacks Credence but doesn't kill him, doesn't do what we think he's supposed to. He's some kind of bounty hunter, but then it turns out he's really working for Grindelwald, and by killing the Irma Lagarde, is that her name? Irma Dugard, the servant, he's driving Credence closer and closer to Grindelwald. I think it's that idea. And then we have
removing options.
Yeah.
And then, as if this isn't enough story, we bring in Yusuf Karma, who encounters Tina, and let's just say who he is. So, Leda Lestrange's father is Corvus Lestrange. Corvus Lestrange once fell in love with Yusuf's mother and enchanted her away from Yusuf's father, and married her, and she gave birth to a daughter. That is Lita. And then she died in childbirth. And then Corvus Lestrange married another woman, and she had a child that Yusuf is convinced is Credence. And so he's convinced that Credence is Corvus Lestrange Jr. And so his revenge is to kill the person that he loved the most, and that would be his son that Corvus loved the most. So it would be his son. So he wants to kill Corvus Lestrange. Then we have this whole thing where he's got some kind of parasite that he picked up, which is really kind of irrelevant to the story.
Yeah, totally. It's just to kind of show Newt doing something weird.
Yeah, it's a distraction. I thought it was significant. I'm like, oh, what is this? He's got something, and he's going to turn out to be something else. Or no, it's just that he's got an infection. I'm like, okay, slap a Band-Aid on it. What are we doing? and so we have this little thread. And eventually what that does is it gets Lita to admit to her own hidden shame, which is that she feels responsible for the death of her brother because she was accompanying the servant on the steamship across the ocean when it was sinking, and she had swapped the children, her brother, for this other lady's brother who happened to be someone of the Wizarding World whose child happened to end up being Credence. And so we're supposed to believe she was a Dumbledore, based on what Grindelwald said.
But based on Grindelwald.
But only based on that,
that's
right?
That's the only indicator we have that this was
right
a Dumbledore.
Right. So this is the burden that Lita has been carrying, is that she thinks she's responsible for the death of her brother, which apparently is. I mean, apparently Corvus did go down with with the ship. So this poor child. Another scene where I had trouble, as a dad. It's just hard to watch those things for me.
Mm-hmm.
But so we talked about Newt capturing the Chinese lion, the Zhuo, which was, like you said, there was a lot of fun with the little the bauble that he commits it to chase. That was very cute.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, and this is really going back to the Lita thing really quickly, because the Boggart scene, the Boggart training scene. Yeah. I think it's really important, and it really tells a lot about the character in such a short amount of time. It's so great because, the Boggart, and this is one where you have to be a Potterhead to kind of know what's going on, because they're doing the Boggart training scene, which means that the Boggart's going to pop out, and it's going to be the thing you fear the most. And we see the joke first, which is Newt. It pops out, it's a desk.
Right.
And the innocence it takes to have your greatest fear be a desk job.
Right.
It's just a beautiful representation of this this person, of the person that Newt is, and why he can communicate so well with all these animals that he does, because he just does not want to be tied down. That's it. That's
Right.
really all there is to it.
Definitely.
And then you follow that up with the depth of Lita's floating cloth.
Right.
And they don't explain it. They don't explain anything about what it is. They don't, at that moment right there, they just let it hang. And you know that it's intense. You see that it's intense. And from the previous scenes with the Boggarts and, Harry's Boggart being what it was and Lupin's Boggart being what it was, you see that it's an intense moment. And then they leave it alone for a little while and then come back to it later with the story about what was happening. And that was that was powerful. That was a really powerful way to bring that character through. I really loved that whole setup for Lita. That was really good.
Yeah, that when you first see it in the Boggart scene, it's just a sheet floating down under blue light, and so you don't know what it is. But when you see her reliving it, you see very clearly that as a child in its swaddling clothes and underwater, and that oof. And in fact, in this flashback, after this flashback Lita has of being at Hogwarts and meeting Newt and going through this, she has this encounter with Dumbledore in 1927, where he tells her that confession is a great weight lifted, a relief. And for all of us who Catholic, we yep, I know that. Been there many times, and we'll be there again. Yes, it is. But it's an interesting way to phrase that confession is a great weight lifted. It is. And you know that if only Lita had that opportunity, and Dumbledore and others, man, what the difference in their lives it would make if they could relieve themselves of that burden with someone who could understand. I would love to see. I don't think it would do it well, but I would love to see what Christianity is with the Wizarding World. What would how you would reconcile it and how you would integrate it, but that's a topic for another day, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I think it's good that they stray from that, and that you kind of assume that the world around the Wizarding World is a more secular world, just because then the magic,
yes,
the magic gets to take its own form and doesn't have to be bound by all of these other rules and structures. And it really is. It's not our world. It's a world very similar to ours that is built this way.
Right. And they do hint at witch hunting in the past, and but to their credit, they don't actually go there and blame Christians for killing witches and all that sort of stuff. They don't get into that, which I thank them for not taking that route on that. One of the things I really love, some of the special effects in this movie were really great. Especially, I love the images of Paris that they had. But when they had this scene of the black sheets covering Paris as Grindelwald calls people to his rally, I mean, it was such a powerful symbolic image of darkness descending on Europe. I mean, again, that we evokes this time in history, in European history, with the rise of evil in Europe. It really evoked that imagery as these sheets fell across the city. I thought that was fantastic.
Well, you know what I kept thinking when I saw that Grindelwald's call was trying to recall what Voldemort's call was, and it was the rise of the Dark Mark. And I just kept thinking, gosh, I really need to have a look at that again and compare the music that was played. Of course, they played music in a kind of minor key during that particular scene where Grindelwald was calling his followers. And I thought it would be very interesting to compare that scene with the scene that was in one of the Harry Potter films. Maybe it was the 5th film, I think, where Voldemort was calling his followers with the Dark Mark. So it was just a flashback that I had in my head when I saw that scene.
I'll have to go take a look.
And the colors are very different. I like that Grindelwald's was done in the middle of the day. The scene that you're talking about was done in the middle of the night, and it was this green, sickly skull. Yeah. And I think that the kind of evil that you see between Grindelwald and Voldemort is very different. Voldemort's is much more of a sickly, manic, grasping kind of evil, whereas Grindelwald's is a much more subtle,
urbane.
Yeah, very, very cultured, but very powerful. A lot of power behind it because
attractive.
Of that. Yeah, and it is. There's something just very, very attractive about it. You're like, oh man, that's really like that's cool. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but the Elder Wand made an appearance in this movie. So they were passing wands back and forth at one point, and you see that the Elder Wand is already in play. So it's already out, and that's how he's able to do assumedly some of this very, very potent magic.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Like even in so with Voldemort, even his followers were afraid of him. They were sort of even like a little bit repulsed by him. But with Grindelwald, he's charismatic. He is that final speech. Is he really? Even some of the Aurors are attracted to it. You know, they start to be the glamour of evil rubs off, and so it's very interesting there. One of the things I want to mention, speaking of like the setting of Paris, I kept noticing. Of course, the Eiffel Tower keeps showing up because it's the Paris. I kept noticing Sacré-Cœur, the beautiful Church of the Sacred Heart, kept showing up in a lot of backgrounds. And there was one shot where Credence and Grindelwald are standing on a rooftop, and Grindelwald invites him to the rally with Grindelwald, Credence, and Nagini. And behind Grindelwald, very clearly in the shot, almost intentionally in the shot, is Sacré-Cœur. And I was trying to think of what was this about? Why was this angle important? Why was it? I mean, they're on a set with a green screen. They could put anything behind them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Why was that the choice? And I don't know. And I thought it was very interesting. And if maybe you might have some speculation, or some of the listeners might want to send some comments and make some comments about why they think. But I thought it was a very interesting choice. So then we have this encounter with Nicholas Flamel at the safe house.
Definitely.
And Flamel is a real historical person, in case for those who are aware. He lived in France in the 14th century and was supposed to have discovered how to make a Philosopher's Stone, which we see when he opens up that cabinet and he pulls out the book. And a Philosopher's Stone is that for the first Harry Potter book. It turns metal into gold and can grant eternal life, which is why he's so old. In reality, Flamel was a bookseller, and he and his wife were quite wealthy because she inherited estates from two previous deceased husbands. And a legend says he learned alchemy while on the Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage.
Huh.
Which is very interesting. Yeah.
That's really cool.
yeah. That's the legend about the real Nicholas Flamel, not just the character in the movie. So I thought that was an interesting little hidden layer of Harry Potter.
There you go.
But did we see him in the first movies, or was he just talked about?
He was just talked about.
Okay. All right.
I don't even know. Was he talked about in the movies? And so this is one where I don't remember if he was mentioned specifically in the movies. I know he was in the books.
If he was mentioned, it may have been in one of the frog cards.
Oh, that's a possibility.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, I'm pretty sure he was, because then that's when Harry Potter remembers when he sees one of those frog cards.
That's right. That's when he makes the connection between that's the thing that they were looking for and what must be stored.
Okay.
There you go. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
As is de rigueur, this type of movie, they have to break into the secure location. In this case, the French Ministry of Magic, which I love the design, the French Art Deco. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but the French design of this era, which is just beautiful. And so they make the Ministry of Magic look like it. And they're breaking into to find Lita's record and find out who Credence really is. Then they get these scary black cats that attack them.
That won't attack you unless you harm them. And wait, didn't get time to say that before Lita.
yeah. I wish you told me that before I attacked them. And then we have the Chinese dragon lion. I'm sorry if you know Chinese legendary better than I do, and think of it, if I'm wrong that it's a dragon lion sort of thing, let me know. But the Zuo, I'll try to say
Zhou, I think.
Oh,
Joe, I think.
Juo. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I am not going to try to speak Chinese. So we so I'm just trying to think of like where did so we let's go to the to the tomb with Lita's family tomb. This is the Lestrange tomb, family tomb. This is where the answers are. This is where Lita's answers are. This is Yusuf's answers. This is where Jacob is looking to find Queenie. This is where Credence hopes to find his answers. And this is where Lita reveals about the Lestrange family tree, and she reveals her own secret. And she does that moment where she tells Newt, "You never met a monster you couldn't love," in referring to herself. And then we find out that there's this rally that's going on inside the Lestrange tomb in this magical space, and it was all a trap. Queenie was a trap. The family tree was the whole thing was all a trap designed to bring them all to the rally, not just Credence, but to get them all there. Grindelwald wanted them all there, wanted the Aurors there. He wanted them all in there, and so it's very interesting. Everybody is now in place for his final act. In fact, what you see is everything has gone according to Grindelwald's plan so far. Like this is they've pretty much all played into his hands.
You see that he's as much of a conniver as Dumbledore ever has been, and so all of the pieces are very much under his control. Even if he has wild cards, they're not out there. They're just I'm waiting for it to come through. That's
right. I noticed that the pureblood enforcers in the rally, the ushers, so to speak, they are very much on the nose as sort of Nazi brown shirts, except they're wearing blue. But I mean, you make the shirts brown, and they're definitely Nazis. So there's a very conscious decision to make this connection in the director's point of view. But Grindelwald manipulates this whole situation to get one of the Aurors to kill. I assume he kills this woman who's a participant in the rally, so that he can make them the enemy. See, I am the one in the right. They're the ones who are aggressors. I'm peaceful. They're attacking, and so he invites them all to follow him, to apparate away with him, and calls the others to join him. And so Queenie joins them. Credence joins him, but Lita, we think, is going to join him, but she does Thanos and the Infinity Stone and ends up getting dissolved, sacrificing herself to save the others. Nagini did not go with Credence and Grindelwald, which I thought is very interesting, and maybe it goes more to your point, Thomas, about who Nagini eventually becomes.
Yeah, and I think too. I'm not sure that she's a magic user. I don't know what the I'm not sure what the rules about a Maledictus are, but it doesn't necessitate a magic user.
That's true.
Yeah, she just has the blood curse.
Right.
She's enchanted or magic, but not necessarily a magic user.
And she was part of a circus and was, an attraction in the circus. So there would have to be a huge level of guarding a magic user at that point. Well, I don't know. I guess you could just take their wand away. That would be enough for most magicians not to be able to.
We have a moment where Newt tells Theseus that he's chosen his side in this battle. Well, that's good. We find out that the Niffler, the little Niffler, who's just he steals every scene he's in, stole Grindelwald's vial, the blood pact. And then at Hogwarts, Newt goes to speak to Dumbledore alone as they're arriving. That's a very interesting moment where Theseus stops everybody else and says, no, let him go talk to Dumbledore alone. And I wasn't sure why he would do that. What he expected that to be about, or even what happens, because Newt just says, you have a blood pact with him, huh? And and then he has the vial there. If they manage to break the vial, does it mean that they can undo the blood pact and Dumbledore can now fight Grindelwald? What do you think?
I mean, it's possible because it is in the canon that at least 20 some years later, 1945, supposedly, that Dumbledore and Grindelwald did have a duel. And in that duel, Dumbledore won, which meant that he won control of the Elder Wand.
Right.
And that necessitates Grindelwald's having the wand removed from him, which would theoretically be his death. But
right. That brings to mind then, I have a feeling we're going at some point in this series of movies, we're going to see World War II from a wizarding perspective.
Oh, I certainly don't doubt that.
Yeah, that should be very interesting. And as if the whole Aryan Nazi thing weren't enough, we do end the movie with Credence, Queenie, and Grindelwald in Austria, where in a German-speaking country, the country where Hitler was from, and I find interesting. Queenie apparently can't read Grindelwald's mind.
Yeah. Well, remember that this is not uncommon because a wizard should be trained in how to do that. And that was what they were trying to do with Harry throughout the movie. Snape was trying to train him how to resist the Legilimens because...
Okay.
But the problem with Harry could never get it. Snape just thought he was lazy, but it was because Voldemort was actually inside of Harry's mind in the original movies because Harry was
right.
Horcrux. And so that's why Voldemort wasn't reading his mind. He was actually connected to him in a much deeper level than anyone actually knew. And so, but that apparently that is a skill you can have. And I would imagine that somebody as silver-tongued as Grindelwald would have developed that.
Right.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure.
While Newt apparently didn't develop that because Queenie was able to read his mind. Yeah. And so Grindelwald tells Credence that you are actually Aurelius Dumbledore, that you have a phoenix, that a phoenix comes to a Dumbledore in need, which is interesting. And he hands him a wand, which he immediately is able to use to blast a mountainside, which says something, which is that he has some native talent with magic. I mean, apparently, previous to this, all of his magicking has been pretty much as an obscurial, right? I mean, that's pretty much how he's been able to work. But now he's got that wand. He can right off the bat do something amazing right there.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second.
You think Grindelwald manipulated it?
Here's the thing. I mean, the one thing I don't buy is Grindelwald's assertion that Credence is the Dumbledore. However, if you recall, like when kids are young, right? I mean, there's a reason why you don't have a wand before you enter Hogwarts or any of the other wizarding schools.
Right.
And so basically as a kid, maybe you have uncontrolled magic. You don't know how to focus that. And so if it turns inward, like, there may have been some speculation that Ariana Dumbledore may have been an obscurial. Who knows? I think that's some of the speculation. But, to get back to my point, so with the younger kids, their use of the magic is unfocused. They learn how to focus their use in one of the wizarding schools. Now, of course, Credence never had this chance. So it did not surprise me that once he got his hand on a wand, he was able to use it straight away. Now, who knows if that wand fits him or not? Who knows? But but that certainly didn't surprise me considering the background of, with the wizarding kids, right? That they learn how to focus their magic through the use of a wand when they go to school. And Credence never had that opportunity.
Right.
And it's a, I don't know. I still think it's part of Grindelwald's lie. I think that he's setting him up and knows what an obscurial is capable of and is allowing him to focus that a little bit.
Right.
But that it's not, you're this powerful wizard out of the box that you didn't know. And even like the Phoenix is a setup. It's through, you see it happen through the movie, and then right there at the end they have the little baby bird thing that Grindelwald does something to wake up into a phoenix, right? So the whole thing just feels like a setup. It just feels like more of he's telling this person what they want to hear, so that they become a tool that he can use.
Right.
Mhm.
Because what does he need to, what does Credence want more than anything? To know who he is. More than anything else, he wants to know who he is. And he tells them, okay, this is who you are, and these are the people who have taken it from you. Now go get them, essentially,
Right.
is what is the plan. So what do you think? Where are we going with this? What's the next, what are we going to see next from the next movie, the next part of this story? And any so either hopes or predictions that you might want to mention besides what we've already talked about? Newt and Tina together, Queenie. Okay, let's just assume Queenie and Jacob get back together. I mean, this is this is the movies after all. Like we can't have these characters end up completely separated forever.
Right.
I don't think they're that brave in these movies. It would be interesting, but I don't think they would go there. But I don't. I mean, I know we're eventually going to end up in this epic battle where Dumbledore defeats Grindelwald. So how do we get from here to there with Newt? Where does Newt go? That's the question. I mean, really.
Yeah. He's at some point he's going to have to fade to the side. Which
Right.
is tough because I like I don't want it to stop being about him, but the story is set up in such a way that it has to at some point stop being that. Or maybe he's just, that story. And this is one thing that I think felt so difficult about this movie is that story was not a backdrop for his story. It was his story at this point. But I think there is a way moving forward where you could take that story and move it more into the background and let Newt's story carry on. He still has to be involved because he's picked a side now.
Right.
But he doesn't necessarily have to be the one going up against the big bad guy. There are lots of other ways that he can help the cause.
Well, through his creatures, of course.
Exactly.
So, so I'm pretty sure that the creatures will continue to play some sort of a role. And who knows if we get introduced to other new creatures as we did here.
Maybe we'll see Newt will have an apprentice of some sort by the name of Hagrid. That might be where Hagrid gets introduced. I don't know.
Hagrid's too close to Harry timeline wise.
Yeah.
They've been messing with the timeline all over the place anyway, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Was Newt ever that big of a was he a big hero in Harry's time? I mean, was he a known figure? I mean, he was just the guy who wrote this obscure book, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And I mean, so if and yet he's turning out to be this hero figure. I think perhaps he retreats in humility from the limelight. He's one of those guys who does the thing that needs to be done and then walks away from the light, the limelight, not the light of goodness, but from the limelight to back to his quiet life, perhaps.
Some are born great, some are achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Right? Is that the
yes?
That's the quote there. So, and I think he's definitely one of those characters, one of those figures, and you see that in the way Dumbledore talks to him, saying that you don't seek power, you don't seek fame, you see what's right and you do it. And that's an admirable trait. It really is, and it's a trait that we have so little of in the world, and can do with a lot more of.
Right. Any other notes that we haven't covered? Anything that we want to mention before we finish off here?
I have one scene that I think was beautifully done in this movie that could have been a real tragedy, and that was the scene in which Dumbledore looks into the mirror of Erised.
Oh, that's right. And
that scene, because of all of the the stuff we were not talking about earlier with Dumbledore and who his character is and what his character's been made. That scene was so deftly handled. It said everything it needed to say, and it left it open for whichever side wanted to see what they needed to out of it. But it also left that note there that we don't know truly the inside of Dumbledore's heart about this, but his desire was for Grindelwald. That is what he sees when he looks in the mirror, and he sees a lot of history with him. And then he sees the man that is currently there. And that's such an interesting scene because it tells us a lot about who he still is, and doesn't say so much that it's like, oh well, now you've ruined the character, you've done whatever to the character
Right.
that I didn't want to have happen or whatever.
It doesn't bash you over the head with it. It
Right.
just this is take from it what you will at this moment.
Yeah, well, I think also the Mirror of Erised scene, isn't that also where we have a little bit more insight on exactly what that pendant was from that necklace?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's when I thought, I'll bet anything that was probably from an unbreakable vow. I think that's when that idea popped into my head.
Right. Yeah. And it also raises the question of why did they feel the need to make this pact? Why did they make this unbreakable vow? What did they see? They must have been, or maybe they were friends at once and saw the possibility of where they were going in the future, or maybe they weren't friends, but were both had come to some sort of agreement. It'd be interesting to see how that develops in the future.
Yeah, I thought they were more than friends, and didn't Dumbledore himself admit that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in this particular movie, when the lead Auror comes to him and says that you were like brothers, and he said we were closer than brothers. And that was his immediate response to it.
Right.
We were closer than brothers.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you also have here the concept of what is an unbreakable vow. A magically bound one, obviously there are some penalties and things like that. But I mean, does that mean that these people no longer have free will? Like they're clearly bound not to be able to do this thing. But what does that mean? And for us as people who make vows in our lives for all sorts of things, what does that mean for us too? And I think we see in the church a lot too with marriages and the way that we hold marriage in a different regard than the culture at large, and how an annulment is not the same thing as a divorce, no matter how many people want it to be.
Right.
It's a meaningful thing to say that this is a vow that is external to you. Like you have now released it from your power to control it. You have made a vow. It is outside of your realm to control, and you have to abide by it. And that's it's a deep thing to wrestle with in a series like this.
Yeah, I mean, when you make a covenant, you are about. It is a blood covenant. A covenant is more than a contract. It is a agreement in which you pledge your very life, your blood, your being to hold it, and that's what God does with us, and Jesus does at the cross. He fulfills that covenant. But I'm thinking about another sort of something within Catholicism in which we are prevented from doing, or someone, a Catholic Christian, is prevented from doing something, but yet retains his free will, and that's papal infallibility. According to the doctrine of papal infallibility, the Pope cannot teach something contrary to faith and morals, the faith and morals of the Church. Cannot teach that. It is a positive prevention. He could say all kinds of things, but if he tried to say something, he would not be able to. If he tried to say something contrary, he could not. Just wouldn't be able to. And what does that mean? Does he not have free will? That's still an open question from Catholic theologians. Is what does that actually mean for the Pope's free will? But it's interesting to bring that up in regard to this idea of an unbreakable vow, and certainly that we need more of these sorts of respect for vows that can't be broken, I suppose, as you're saying, in our society, vows are all too disposable.
Well, yeah, like marriage, until death does you part, right?
Yes. Yep, it should be.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That was good. I'm glad you brought that up. Anything else? Anything other bits? If not, I will bring us to a close. Before I do, I want to take a minute to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Movies and TV shows and all the shows we do at StarQuest. Today, I want to thank by name Eric R., Patricia S., Joseph S., Philip C., and Father Terrence. It's through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give that makes it possible for us to make the Secrets of Grindelwald, for instance. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of this movie, The Crimes of Grindelwald? Not The Secrets of Grindelwald. That's us. The Crimes of Grindelwald. Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page and leave us feedback there. Or you can send an email to secrets@sqpn.com and we can read your feedback on a future show. And you'll find relevant, if we have any relevant links. I'm not sure I have any relevant links to this discussion, but our show notes will be on sqpn.com. And until next time, Lynn, Francisco, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of the Crimes of Grindelwald.
It was a pleasure.
Thomas and Ho, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on StarQuest.